I'm Michael Omodt-Lopez.
And I'm Dr. J.
And today we're going to be interviewing a U.S. Navy SEAL who goes by the name of Joe Smith.
Well, and what I did, and I was a little bit unique. I wasn't always out at these remote villages. For me, I was at the FOB, and the FOB served as a sort of a support squad for all the remote locations. Um, my support was in intelligence refinement. So my average day literally was getting up, usually pretty late in the morning. I would take a shower. And understand when you're at a FOB or you're out in these places, for 9 months straight, I took a shower in a public shower every day, and when I got a shower and I wasn't in those remote areas, or I used a public toilet every day. So I would have to walk from my room outside in the winter to go take a shower. I'd come back, I'd have chow, and then we'd have a daily briefing with our commander. It's kind of like, hey, this is what we did yesterday, this is our plan for today and the following week. And each department, the logistics guys would brief their stuff, the intelligence would brief their stuff, and then our operations we would brief. I would go back to my office, try to refine information and intelligence with a couple other offices, and the point was just to try to identify what the Taliban's up to, where they're going to be next, and what kind of attacks have already happened, and how we can kind of counter or prevent anything else. And then if we got to the point where we were able to refine locations or predict where guys were going to be at, then we would plan an operation, whether it was a couple days in advance or even that night if we had contingency plans. And we would have time-sensitive target packages set up so, if we had something that we call a trigger, to where we would identify a particular Taliban leader in an area, then we'd fly out and go to that area and grab them. And a lot of times what I would do is I would partner up with International Securities Assistant Forces Special Operations, and that's ISAF. You'll hear that on TV quite a bit. So I would partner up with ISAF SOF, and the guys that I was working with are the Lithuanians and the Latvians. And we would fly American helicopters into villages and snatch these guys. So I would do that at night, and then I'd go to bed, sometimes 3, 4 in the morning. Sometimes I didn't get back until it was breakfast time. The best experience, like I said before, we spend a career training to do what we do, and make no mistake, we train to kill people. That's what we do. A lot of our missions are tagged with something called capture kill, and the reason that we do that is it's kind of a rules of engagement. There's some law of armed conflict in there, but the idea is, okay, you're going to go get this guy. The law is written. It's like, ideally you want to capture him because there's information to glean from him, but legally, because of what he's done and we have on record and proof, if you meet any resistance from him, then you're cleared to just neutralize him. So this particular case, a friend of mine, a guy that worked for me, and a couple other folks that worked for me, multiple intelligence support. So part of my assigned duties over there, I was executive leadership for what's called a cross-functional troop. And it's cross-functional because it has multiple intelligence avenues. So you got people that deal with weather, you got people that deal with human intelligence, people that deal with signals intelligence, and you take all this and combine it together, and you formulate pictures, and that's how we develop and figure out where these guys are at. So this group that worked for me, and a bunch of us were from Minnesota. So what we did is we would name our objectives, which is the Taliban leadership, based off cities in Minnesota. The first one that we were able to get was this guy, Objective Augusta. So what this guy was responsible for doing was attacking one of our remote locations. So SEAL Team 2 had a platoon staying in a village, and they had received continuous indirect fire or mortar fire, which we call indirect fire or IDF. And they got that for a prolonged period of time and found out that this guy was responsible, Objective Augusta. So we worked for a couple of months trying to refine his location so we could figure out where he was at so we could take care of the problem. As our guys are trying to train locals and they're getting bombed, it's not suitable for training or recruiting. So we had a mission to get this guy, and it was kind of a shot in the dark. And we got this trigger this one night, so we went in early in the morning and we caught him sleeping. He kind of denied who he was, but the village itself was so fed up with this guy because he was such a bully that they identified him. So at one point in the tactical questioning while we were in the field, which others would refer to as interrogation, but we call it tactical questioning because it's a legal term. He actually self-identified himself. So he self-PID'd. We call that positive identification. He self-PID'd, so we marched him back out into our extraction zone where we had our CH-47s come and pick us up. And I remember just standing there looking at this guy blindfolded, looking at my buddies that we had worked on with for 2 months trying to get this guy, and just having a good feeling because we knew that these guys in that remote location were going to be receiving a lot less IDF. So that was pretty much my best hour there, just knowing that guy was done for. As far as being scared, there's a particular amount of heightened awareness or nervousness, like all the time walking out there. Their biggest tool that the Taliban uses is IEDs. So when we're walking into a village, or we're bringing a four-wheeler in, or we're driving a vehicle in, you're always kind of on edge because you never know. Like at any time, you could have a detonation. I've been shot at outside. I've been shot at inside a house. These are things that you train so much for. It just becomes more or less something you kind of flinch at and then you react to. I can't say that I was really scared. After the fact, you kind of think about it and you're like, whoa, that was close. But since the training is such second nature, you're not really scared. There was one particular time that was probably the most I ever flinched, or maybe you could call it scared. This is in Iraq, though. We had come we were chasing an Iranian IED cell, and we had gotten about 6 of their dudes, and we were going after another guy, a guy that manufactured the stuff. And we used an explosive breach, so we blew his front door. He was laying on the bed. He was laying on the floor, and he rolled over to grab a weapon. I was a couple of guys deep going into the room. The guys ahead of me shot that guy, and then I lined up on the stairwell that went up the staircase. In another room, another guy got shot. At the same time, I'm waiting for someone to stack behind me so that I could take a couple of guys upstairs with me. At that time, a guy peeked around he opened the door at the top of the stairs and peeked and saw us and freaked out and went back into the room. When he went back into the room, something came tumbling down the stairs, and I thought it was a grenade. It turned out to be his sandal because he fled so quickly. But it was kind of freaky watching this thing roll down the steps because I was about to retreat because I thought it was a grenade. But we ended up going up the stairs, and we threw a flashbang into the room. It went in the room, and we neutralized him because he was trying to make ready an AK-47. So that's about the scariest that I've ever been. The sadness is that the culture in Afghanistan is a culture of lawlessness. And if you've seen pictures from Afghanistan outside of Kabul and a couple of other main cities, you really see homes made of mud and straw. And essentially, the people of Afghanistan, they live in like the 16th century. And we went into some villages and they thought we were Russians because they didn't have any outside touch with the world. So they still thought it was the Russians from the war in the 70s that they had. So they didn't realize they don't have phones. They don't have, the majority of people don't have phones or radios, and they certainly don't have any television. They barely have any kind of periodicals to keep up with the world. And sometimes they're so remote that getting to a periodical is it's just inaccessible. So they have this lawlessness mentality where the corruption lies from, a farmer in a village all the way up through the president of the country. and you're talking a lawlessness of, a socially acceptable, um, child molestation. They don't talk about it, but it's there. They have no value with women. Um, every government official takes money from both sides, and to some extent, local governments have to kind of deal with the Taliban because they do have power. So they have to negotiate some stuff like, okay, hey, leave my city alone, and I'll give you passage or whatever. So sometimes they have to negotiate, and I get that. That's the downside of politics. But the problem is nobody has any solid moral compass there. And when you're a small kid, whether you're a girl and you're worthless, or you're a boy and you're a servant in filthy ways, you grow up to be somebody that doesn't have, a lot of um, morals. So it just ends up being a lawless culture, and it's a terrible thing. I'm making a lot of generalities, but I'd say about 75 to 80% of the population is like this.